All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is the next morning after the day of the race, after the Richmond Raceway race for the Federated Auto Parts 400. It was the second race of the playoffs, so it was the second race of the round of 16. We'll go over some playoff bubble situations coming out of the race, as well as what went down in the race. It was pretty self-explanatory. First of all, it was a clean night. There was no cautions for incident. They had that early competition yellow at the very beginning of the race there. And honestly, for the first third of the race, it looked like Austin Dillon had the fastest car at that point in time. He actually ended up leading quite a few laps there for a little bit as well, once he ended up getting to the lead. At the end of stage number one, though, it was Denny Hamlin getting the top of the charts, as I predicted there in the predictions video earlier yesterday. So just like that, Denny Hamlin went on to win stage one. But in stage two, he was pretty much a non-factor, and pretty much for the rest of the race was a non-factor. By the end of the race, he ended up finishing one lap down outside the top 10. So not a good performance by Denny Hamlin, but because of the stage points he scored and the finishing points, he does lock himself into the playoffs on points no matter what happens going forward in the very next race at Bristol next Saturday night. At the end of stage two, it was Brad Keselowski ended up getting the win there. And as I mentioned, there was no caution for incident throughout this stage as well as the rest of the race. The only caution was the competition yellow and then the two stage breaks. So that was pretty much it. It was a relatively clean night. There was varying pit strategies in stage two as well. Most of it was Kevin Harvick taking a two-stop strategy instead of a one-stop strategy in that stage. So we were likely going to see some varying strategies come stage three that could possibly challenge the number two and the number three car for those top two positions on the racetrack. Of course, Kevin Harvick, we know he was definitely going to go to that two-stop strategy, but as did most of the rest of the field. I think the only cars that tried to do the one-stop strategy was Matt Kenseth and Kurt Busch, and I think everybody else took that two-tire strategy because they saw how much track position Harvick was able to gain from it, and obviously it didn't work out for Kenseth or Kurt Busch, because by the end of the race, they just were not anywhere close to it. Kenseth really was a non-factor most of the day. Kurt Busch was clinging on to the top 10 for a little bit there, so it was kind of worth it for him in a sense that he is right on the playoff bubble exiting the race. It maybe wasn't worth it. Probably could have stayed in hindsight, but hindsight's always 20/20. It all came down to the fact Kurt Busch tried it. It didn't pan out for him, but he didn't lose a whole lot of points. And really, the end result for Kurt Busch really didn't change much. He might have lost a couple points, though, and every point is valuable, but I don't think he really lost out too much on it. Brad Keselowski led the most laps. He led over half the race, and he ended up going on to win the race as well as winning stage two, as I earlier stated. So Brad Keselowski, he moves on to the next round of the playoffs. The three spots are locked up. Hamlin is all locked up on points no matter what happens. Harvick is locked up after winning the Southern 500, and Keselowski after winning at Richmond. And those are probably the three championship favorites right now, and I think Truex is a close third between him and Keselowski. With the consistency Truex has had this season, his consistency continued as he ended up finishing second. He was in the top three most of the night as well. Austin Dillon really, really impressed. He is over plus 30 points above the cut line exiting this race. He finished fourth place, so he came to race as long as he doesn't wreck out of Bristol and really, doesn't even need to score stage points. As long as he runs on the top 15, he's going to easily make his way to the next round. So good for Austin Dillon. That was definitely a shocker. I had him eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. And so we're going to look at the finishing results of the race, and we'll talk a little bit about the points there. And we'll take a look at how the fantasy team did, because the fantasy team did very well. So here is the look at the unofficial results for yesterday's race, because I guess it's the day after. The race didn't end too late, but I was kind of tired by the end of it, so waited until this morning. I wasn't going to break my back over doing the video a day later, but nevertheless, Brad Keselowski with the win. Martin Truex Jr. second. Joey Logano finishes top three. He was in third there, so he keeps a string of top 10s going along. I believe that is 8 of the last 9 races he's finished in the top 10, so pretty quiet run there for Logano, but pretty decent to say the least. We mentioned Austin Dillon. He finished fourth. Quiet day for Chase Elliott, but he ran inside the top 10 all day, finished fifth. Kyle Busch sixth. A lot goes for the same there. Actually, Busch had to start at the rear of the field. Plus, he did not have Adam Stevens in the pit box for tonight's race for his crew chief. So all that considered, great run for Busch, getting the points he needed late here. Didn't score a lot of stage points, but a good finish for sixth. Kevin Harvick, he rallied back to finish seventh. He had a penalty back in stage two, and he tried that strategy. He ended up getting back in the lead lap. Pretty much was a non-factor as far as the race win went. He pretty much kind of spoiled the strategy of what he was going to play back in stage 2, so that ended up probably being an issue by the end of the race because everybody else ended up trying it instead there. They saw how well it worked out, so he couldn't go off strategy, but we know he's in the next round, so it doesn't really hurt him. Eric Almirola, great run. He finished in 8th place. Alex Bowman 9th, and Clint Boyer rounds out the top 10. Boyer was actually a non-factor pretty much all day. Actually, stage 1, he scored a decent amount of stage points. At least it looked like he was going to. Faded back to 10th at the end of the stage. He was a non-factor all stage 2, ran outside the top 10, did not score stage points in stage 2. But in that final stage of the race, he was able to sneak his way into the top 10 there by the very end. Rookie Tyler Reddick was actually the last driver to finish on the lead lap. We had 11 drivers finish on the lead lap by the end of the race. We mentioned Hamlin finishing 12th, but he's locked up into the next round. And we also mentioned Kurt Busch's strategy with the one stopper there in that final stage. I should say it was 2 stops versus 3 in the final stage because the final stage was a little longer, so my bad on that. It was a 2 to 3 stop strategy there, so 2 for Kurt Busch and Matt Kenseth. And it actually kind of worked out for Kenseth in a sense. He was running the top 10 early on, but kind of faded to mid-pack, so it really didn't hurt both of the runnings too bad, if at all, really. Matt DiBenedetto, we expected him to either struggle and keep that trend going or run really well because he runs really well with the 750 horsepower packages, whether it is the short tracks or the road courses. This was a short track. He had decent success here last season with Levine Family Racing. They did not obviously race here earlier this season. This was the first trip to Richmond. But Matt DiBenedetto, kind of a poor run, all things considered. He needed a lot of points. He finished 17th, got 0 stage points, so he is sitting 25 points below the cutoff line going into Bristol. We know Bristol's probably his best racetrack, so he will have a possibility of scoring a lot of points, but he's going to need help. Another driver, Ryan Blaney there, he was virtually nowhere to be found all day long. I expected that. I said on the predictions video he was a driver to stay away from in everybody's fantasy lineup. Not so much because of what happened at Darlington with the bad luck there, but more so because Richmond is his worst track statistically and had not had a top 10 finish in his first prior 8 races in his career at the track, make it 9 now after this one. So Blaney's struggles continue at Richmond Raceway. And another driver who came in below the cutoff line, he lost points just as well as Matt DiBenedetto lost points. Blaney actually lost a couple more because he finished a few spots worse than what DiBenedetto finished. So Blaney is minus 27 going into the next race. Of course, you guys know he's my favorite driver. Similar situation. He runs really well at Bristol. I'm sure he probably feels somewhat confident that he's going to run well there. He might have to win the race, though, as well as DiBenedetto. The only way they can get in is if they score a ton of stage points in the race and they finish in the top 5 and get some help from behind, which obviously could happen. Bristol's a pretty unpredictable race, especially when it comes to the night race. We saw how unpredictable that race was earlier this year. There was a big wreck in that race, too. So that is very well possible that we could see some playoff drivers having major issues there. And if those two just keep their days clean, I expect both of them to at least be in the top 10 most of the days. So that'll definitely be on the lookout. William Byron had a rough day. He was basically a 20th place car at best all day long. He finished 21st. He finds himself now below the cutoff line as well. Nowhere near as bad as what Blaney and DiBenedetto are, but that is definitely a tough run for William Byron going forward. Jimmy Johnson had a rough day. Notably, the only reason we're pointing this out is, of course, it's his final season, going for that final win, even though he's not in the playoffs. Jimmy Johnson ran right around 30th the whole race. He did have a lot of right rear corner panel damage. He got in the wall in the first half of the first stage of the race, so really 40, 50 laps in. He kind of got the right rear into the wall off of turn 4. He had quite a bit of damage. That affected the aero the rest of the night, and that is why he was running right around 30th most of the race there. And the only DNF went to Timmy Hill with a rear hub issue. Again, no accidents to record in the race today. There was an incident that there might have been a caution for James Davidson, but they stayed green because he kept it rolling. I'm surprised he didn't have to come down to pit road either. I thought he knocked the fenders in, but hey, he stayed out on the track, and I guess it was good for him. He didn't bring out the caution. So nevertheless, that is going to do it there. Let's take a look at how the fantasy team did. So 8 weeks to go in that contest now after the finish of this race here today, or again yesterday at Richmond, and we had a really solid run. Honestly, it was a near perfect performance by the fantasy team there, and even Clint Boyer ended up getting the top 10, but he was the worst of those drivers running throughout the course of the day, so that's why I put him in the garage. But we had Hamlin, we had Harvick, Truex, Kyle Busch, and Brad Keselowski. Of course, Keselowski dominated. He ended up going on to win the race. My must-haves were Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin, Truex ran top 3 all day long. Denny Hamlin did get a stage win in there, and I predicted that stage win also, so that scored me points. Truex was my prediction to win the race. Again, he came close, finished second. Again, solid run there by Truex, and outside of that Darlington race where he probably should have finished top 4, he is on a tear right now. He's finished in the top 4 in 9 of the last 10 races now. And again, like I said, Darlington, he had the fastest car, led the most laps, and probably could have won the thing if it wasn't for him and Elliott getting together. So, nevertheless, Truex is definitely on the tear there. Great week for fantasy. We are actually only 89 points back from the top spot for the playoffs. Of course, you guys know, if you win the playoff standings, you win $10,000. So there is the contest there. We are very well in the running after a great week there. We had a decent week at Darlington. We would have had a great week there if it wasn't for Truex and Elliott getting together, because I had both of them. Otherwise, it would have been everybody in the top 10 there. We didn't have a driver that finished worse than Denny Hamlin, I guess, back there in 11th by the end of the race. But again, 12th by the end of the race. But again, he's had some stage points by winning that opening stage. So that definitely helped, and they lived up to the expectation. So that is going to do it here for this one. Subscribe for more daily NASCAR content. Hit the like button down below if you enjoyed the video. Comment down below what were your takes on the race. I'd like to hear from you guys. And we'll be back again for more prediction and post-race analysis video next week for the Bristol night race, cutoff race for the round of 16. Should be a lot of fun. And keep the streams going as usual with the realistic broadcasts for NASCAR Heat 5. Still working on the Thunder 04 series. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So again, see you guys next time.